So here I'm gonna sketch the four monopoly situation graphs that you can use to follow along if you need to complete the worksheet. So the first situation we have here is sketch a graph of a monopoly earning positive economic profits. I guess first thing to recall is that for monopoly, remember the monopolist is the only firm in the market, so it's going to face the entire demand curve. And we talked about how Mr. and DARP split in this situation. Off to the right here, I've reminded ourselves of the order I suggest that you create kind of for curves for any situation, but it works in monopoly. But this order would also work for perfect competition, and you'll see that it'll also work for monopolistic competition. All right, so when we're ever going to sketching these graphs, first thing we're going to do is draw the revenue curves. The first thing we'll do is draw the demand curve in. I typically like to have it be just a nice line, and I'm going to go ahead and label that DARP. And remember we talked about how those three things always stick together: demand, average revenue, and price. So any point along this curve is going to represent any of those three things for the monopolist. Next we have to draw in the marginal revenue curve. And we talked about how because the average revenue curve is going down, the marginal revenue curve is also going to has to be below the average revenue curve. And then also we talked about price effect and quantity effect as that reason. Whenever you have a straight line demand curve, it's going to turn out, if I showed you the algebra, the marginal revenue curve is basically going to go down, kind of start at the same point and then have a slope twice as steep as the demand curve. And it actually can go negative, so I did draw this past the line on purpose. Marginal revenue, this is the marginal revenue curve, can in fact go negative. It's just possible that if I lower my price to sell one more unit, that I actually could lose some revenue in total, and that's what marginal revenue being zero means. And we saw that back when we looked at elasticity along the demand curve. All right, so we've done step one here, draw the revenue curves. Second step will be to draw our marginal cost. The reason I start with the marginal cost curve is I want to be able to find Q star, which is where I'm going to produce. That's going to help me draw the ATC curve. So I draw in marginal cost in here. That's a little swoosh curve. And so I want to find my Q star line. Remember, we always produce where MR equals MC, so this is where the red meets the blue. And then I'm going to go ahead and trace down in green here to get me Q star. So just Q star is this firm is going to operate at Q star here. And I'm going to go ahead and draw this line all the way straight up to remind myself that I'm only going to look at what's going on this line. I don't really care what's going on over here. I don't care what's going on over here. I know the firm's maximizing profit at this spot, so I only care about the curves along this green line. Okay, so we've done step two here. Now I just want to draw ATC in at the right spot. Well, the right spot is I want it to earn positive economic profit. So the first thing I need to orient myself on is to find average revenue. Well, what I do is I look along Q star here, and where's my average revenue curve? Well, that's the DARP curve. So I know my average revenue is going to be right here. I'll go ahead and trace that over. That's my average revenue. If I know it's going to be an economic profit, I know that my average cost, where it hits the green line, has to be below average revenue, because if it's a profit, cost needs to be below revenue. So I'm going to go ahead and it doesn't really matter where I pick it as long as it's below. And so I'm just going to go ahead and we'll do this one in red because it's a cost curve. I'm going to go ahead and say I want my average cost curve to be right there. And so when I trace over, it'll be average cost. Now I just have to go ahead and draw the cost in. And remember, I need to make this be a U shape, and it has to hit marginal cost at a minimum. So I just can I have some freedom to do what I want to do here, but I need to have it swoop down. And then when it hits marginal cost, I have to make sure that it's at its minimum. Because remember, marginal cost always hits average total cost at its minimum. And so now I've drawn a situation here where there's actually a profit, and I can sketch the profit rectangle. The difference here is the profit per unit. Profit per unit. Here's the quantity that I'm producing at, so profit per unit times quantity gives me total profit, which is that shaded area. So hopefully you can see why that ordering helped me draw this curve in, because average total cost is actually somewhat hard to locate unless you know where your Q star line is. Okay, I'm going to go through these a little more quickly since I've given you the setup on the first one. So now this is the time we want to earn a zero economic profit. Step one, we want to create the revenue curves. Again, it's best, I think, if you just think of them as straight lines, linear demand curve. It's not wrong to do something that's not linear, but it's easier. So this is going to be our DARP curve. And then marginal revenue has to be below, and again, when it's linear, it helps just to draw it starting up at that same spot and twice as steep, because that's what the math would look like in a true situation like that. So that's our marginal revenue curve. Step one is done. Step two, go ahead and create a marginal cost curve, which allows me to locate MR equals MC. So I know where this firm has to produce. I'm going to go down and trace down a Q star where I know that has to be. And just maybe to help ourselves, I'm going to go ahead and draw Q star going all the way up because I know I have to produce along that line. I need to find average revenue. That's the DARP curve. So average revenue is going to be right there when I produce a Q star. Go ahead and write that AR. And now I want a zero economic profit, so that's where I need to locate my average cost. Well, in order to have zero economic profit, my average cost curve has to hit right there. So that along this green line, Q star line, average revenue equals average cost. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick that as my point, and then I have to draw the curve in. So I'm just going to have a U curve. It's going to go through my point. Have to make sure that it hits average cost, hits marginal cost at a minimum. I've done that. And so that's my situation. So it's breaking even there because the Q star, because average cost equals average revenue at the Q star line. Okay, turning the page over, now we want to have a monopoly that earns negative profits but does not shut down in the long run. Well, one thing that's going to be different here is since we're thinking about a shutdown decision, we're going to have to worry about putting an AVC curve in there in addition to the average total cost curve. So we'll remember to do that once we do the locating. But the process is still going to be the same. Draw in your DARP curve. Nice straight line. Downward sloping demand equals average revenue and price. Marginal revenue kind of splits down the middle. Marginal revenue, again, same setup here. Draw in marginal cost, which is our nice swoosh. And so this is a firm with increasing marginal costs. Locate MR equals MC. That's where all firms produce. I'm optimizing profit there. Trace down, find Q star. Go ahead and just maybe to make it clear, draw my Q star line going all the way up. Let's locate where our average revenue is going to be, right here. This firm is earning negative profits, so now I know that when I look along this line, my average cost has to be above average revenue. So I'm going to go ahead and find that spot. I'm just going to pick, it doesn't matter where I pick, I can pick anywhere above here. I'm just randomly picking this point right here. It's higher than average revenue, so I know my average cost is going to be over here. Go ahead and draw my average total cost curve. It's downward sloping, hits at the minimum, comes back up. There's ATC. This will be my, go ahead and sketch it in red. This is my loss rectangle now. That was average cost here. Now, the one thing that we have to take into account here is we're saying that this firm does not shut down in the short run. So what does that mean? Well, remember, we shut down if price is less than average variable cost, because I'm not even digging myself out of the hole if I'm not collecting at least the average variable cost. But this firm is not shutting down. So if we're going to locate average variable cost, we need average revenue needs to be at least above the average variable cost. So I'm just picking some random point below average revenue for the variable cost curve, and I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw it in. It has to hit MC at its minimum. And remember, average variable cost gets closer and closer to ATC as I draw that. So I'm going to throw that in there. And so because AVC here is below average revenue, this is a situation where we're not shutting down. All right, so that's how you do that one. All right, we'll wrap this up. Hopefully you're getting the idea now. Some blue here. We're going to draw my best attempt at a straight line. That's our demand curve. The monopolist faces that downward sloping demand. It's DARP. Marginal revenue below DARP for a monopolist. MR. That was first step 1. Step 2, draw the marginal cost curve so that we can locate where this firm's going to produce, which is at where MR equals MC. Trace down, find Q star. We'll draw Q star all the way up here because we know we have to produce along this line. So we only care about values on this line. Let's locate average revenue again. Average revenue is going to be where the AR from DARP. So our average revenue is going to be here. And now we want negative economic profits and shuts down in the short run. So we got negative economic profit. That means our average cost better be above average revenue. I'm just picking a random spot right here. It's got to swoop down toward MC, hit MC at its minimum. So that worked. Now we want this thing to shut down in the short term. So now instead of being the average variable cost actually needs to be above my average revenue in order to shut down. It can't be below. So I'm just going to pick another point below, or another point below ATC but above average revenue to represent the variable cost. And then it's the same thing. I'm just going to trace that through that point. Make sure it hits MC at its minimum and gets closer and closer to ATC as it moves on to the quantity. So now we can see we only care about values along this line. Average revenue is here. Average cost is all the way up here. So the loss rectangle is going to be this guy. And because average variable cost is here above average revenue, that means shut down. I hope you found this helpful.